Well, good evening. This is Jody Neufeld, and I'm welcoming you all this evening to our weekly Google Hangout it's sponsored by Energion Publications. And this week, my husband and Henry and I are going to talk about publishing. You're going to hear a lot about how and when and what to publish. But I think if I was going to speak to an author, the first thing I would tell them is to pray first. So we're going to start with that tonight. Father, I thank you for the opportunity to just reach out to folks who have um, words that they want to share with others. And may the words of our mouths and the meditations of our heart be pleasing to you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Yeah.
And before we start, Henry, you always tell them that there's a place for questions, and I think tonight more than any other time, we should really make sure that people know that they can put their questions in, and you'll let me know when that's there, and we'll try to answer those questions if we don't cover them in what we have on our list. So please don't hesitate to call in. What about you and I kind of started out? We wrote things before we even started in Energion. So how do you know if what you've got that you're fiddling with on your computer or writing in your journal or whatever, how do you know it's something worth publishing?
I think that's always the hard question uh, because most writers write quite a lot, and we need to write quite a lot. But a lot of what we write, and this is not just for any one person, or I don't think it's just me or just you, just about everybody I've talked to who writes, they have a lot of material that's either in the good old days of the typewriter was in the wastebasket, now might be in that little recycle bin on your computer desktop, uh, and it turned out not exactly to be worthwhile. But I would say one of the key things to knowing what to publish is to listen to other people and find out what needs people are expressing. Very often, as writers, we are extremely self centered people. That is, our problem becomes everybody's problem, and we write to solve our problem. And that's not entirely bad. As a matter of fact, you need to write about your things. You need to write about things that are important to you. But then you need to listen to others to find out if that is something that is going to be helpful to other people. And so listening becomes an important writer's skill, I think. That in order to determine where this is supposed to go, and don't be afraid of throwing things away. I was using as an example um, last couple of days talking to somebody. I used as an example Learning and Living Scripture, which I wrote with Jeffrey Lentz, who co-authored. In the file that we had to start putting that book together, there was more than twice as much material as ended up in the book. So there were a lot of things that we said, the people who are going to need this book don't need this. And that was stuff that was already written. It wasn't, we decided not to write that, but we had written it, but we decided not to include it in the book. So,
Well, and I think too that it's important to remember that a lot of times some of the things that you write are for your own clarification. There's psychologists, psychiatrists, whatever, counselors have said for years that journaling and writing things down, especially when um, whatever it is extremely personal, that sometimes putting it down in black and white can actually help diffuse some of the emotion that can make things kind of confusing and give you some clarity on them. And I found that quite often, myself included, um, people who write more of the story of somebody, or a memoir or whatever. Sometimes you're doing that for your own clarity, and for your own healing, and that's not a bad thing, and it's worth the investment of the time of writing it. It's just not always something that is um, marketable, because you have to always be wondering if what it is that you're going to put out there, why is there something else already out there, and why would somebody be interested in looking at your particular take on a subject versus the other, 500 or 5,000 other books that are on similar subjects. And uh, what are the different kinds of things that people write for? I mean, we've had some uh, poetry, which I'm real happy that our poetry arm has kind of been growing, as well as the fiction. Um, so people write from their imagination, and they write from their hearts. What else? Um,
Well, one of the things a lot of people don't realize, of course, you just mentioned poetry. A lot of people don't realize that we do publish poetry. And at this point, we actually have 4 books of poetry. And then we also have one book titled A Living Psalter under our Inner Power Press imprint that includes quite a number of pieces of poetry within the larger collection. But also we publish fiction, both Christian fiction and more general. And then there are several varieties of what we would call our nonfiction or Christian publishing, such as study guides, uh, uh, theology. We do have some in our Areopagus series, devotional style writing, and each one of these things requires different approaches. And there isn't any single one even there. For example, if you're writing a Bible study guide, you still have a lot of questions about who you're writing for and what you're trying to do uh, with that.
right, and I think that that kind of leads us into, if you have a piece of work that you're wondering if it's published, can be published or not. The really important point is to find a publisher who is interested in what it is that you are writing about. Obviously, uh, an academic publisher probably would not be particularly interested in poetry, um, but that sometimes that's we think that just any publisher will do, and then you get all those rejections, and you could be getting rejected because what you've written doesn't match the publisher.
Yeah, and that's 2 things that come together there. One is the audience. I have frequently talked to authors and asked them, "Who are you writing for?"
And they have
And
no idea.
well, or they say, "I'm writing for everybody." And the answer to that is no, you are not writing for everybody. And even if you have managed to write the truly universal presentation of your topic from which everybody could benefit, your publisher is unlikely to be able to market it to everybody. There's a simple numbers game there and costs to present what's going on to people, that you can't market something to everybody. You have to figure things out. I mean, it's as simple as when I put up a Facebook ad for one of our books or one of our events, the first thing that is asked is, who do you want to target? And so I have to specify who would I like to have seen this ad. And I can say everybody, but then the cost of the ad for the period of time becomes very great. And so that doesn't work. But then on the other hand, you look at different publishers. Publishers have a mission as well. They have their goals. They have things that they want to have in their catalog, and it can be as simple as when you get a rejection from a publisher, it can be as simple as that wasn't what that publisher wanted to add to their catalog at that particular moment. I remember one manuscript that was submitted to me that I sent a rejection note that said, at the end of it, I said, I hope you do get this published. When you do, let me know because I want to get a copy. And which is to say, no, I didn't dislike the manuscript in any way, but it wasn't a fit for Energion Publications' mission or what we were doing at that particular time. So you have to look at it from both ways. I'm going to let you comment some more, Jody, before, but we'd probably need to say a little bit about audience, the different audiences within the general audience of Christian publication.
Yeah, I guess I was just sitting here thinking about that. I truly, prior to being in this particular profession, because I was a nurse before that, didn't really know a lot about publishing at all, didn't realize how many publishing companies have different imprints within their publishing company. They could have a Christian arm, they could have a children's arm, they could have a whatever academic imprint, and I didn't realize that. And sometimes you find out that a publication company, you look inside maybe a book that you have liked, and you thought, well, maybe that, and you look and see what it is. You need to be careful to discern whether or not that's an imprint under a larger umbrella, or if that is in fact, a publishing company, then that's all that they publish. So can you help out to talk about imprints and some of the confusing things?
Well, if I can answer your question, I guess a little bluntly, it's to say imprints is the way a publisher pretends to be several different things at the same time. And that is, Energion Publications has several imprints, and each imprint has a different mission. Now, overall, they do fit together, but that may not be very obvious at the start. So if you're submitting something to us, it's often a good idea to look at our imprints. And I'll just tell you those just so, because a lot of people don't realize. We have our imprint, Enter Power Press, which is for paid publishing. Now we're going to talk about that a little bit further down, the difference between a traditional model and paid publishing model. We have Enzar Empire Press, which is for science fiction and fantasy and mystery. And we have Eucatastrophe Press, which is for the kind of fiction that's really interesting, but it's too off the wall. For some others, we're looking for creative. And you mentioned children's writing. Our largest number of rejections total is in the area of children's manuscripts. That we have really been underwhelmed by children's submissions. And if you're a children's writer and are having a hard time finding a publisher, but you think you have something that's really good, give us a try. Just one warning here: we have a fairly high opinion of what you can present to children, to challenge children. We think that one of our failures in the church is that we do not challenge our children and young people enough. So we're looking for challenging, but nonetheless that addresses the age group. And here's another one. When somebody says children's writing, they say, I'm submitting a children's manuscript, and their proposal can't specify the age range, then we wonder if they've really thought about it.
That's right.
Because writing for 3-year-olds and writing for middle school kids is not the same. And so you should be able to think again about your audience. I can't emphasize that too much. And we do have a question from the audience, and it fits, I think, at this point just as well as any. So I'll go ahead and read that. You can take a stab at it, and I'll follow up. It says, how do you balance business goals with ministry?
Oh,
Is the bottom line for Energion financial, pastoral, missional, or a combination of several goals?
I think the answer to that is that we, over the past 10 plus years, I think that we have learned to pray more and jump in a little slower than we used to. Um, uh, Henry and I are very different in how we think, the way we think. Um, we have very different ways of looking at any specific problem, and we were brought together for a reason for that. And I think that the answer to your question is um, that when we allow a decision to be made of business versus ministry, we find that the clarification comes um, if we give it time to not only pray about it, but time to discuss it. And we've also learned not to be shy about seeking, wise counsel. Also, um, and probably if I think both of us would say if we made mistakes early on, it was that we made mistakes in giving away too much. Um, that the Lord had a plan and a purpose for what we were doing, and we just in general didn't always give the value to something that He wanted us to. So I think we've learned a balance and to lean on each other more than we used to.
Well, let me expand on that, and I may end up with just a titch of preaching here if I don't watch out. But
you go ahead, Dave.
But I think Jody has described the process very well, and this goes back to what I said about a writer, what you're doing and listening. And this is the issue with prayer. I think very frequently our idea of prayer is to explain to God how to run our lives. And God already probably has a fairly good idea of how to act with us, what we are to do. And so prayer needs to be a great deal more about listening and hearing what God wants us to do. One of the ways that God speaks to me, though, and I want to make this very clear, is through the voice of my wife, who also listens. Now, does that mean she's always right? No. Does that mean I'm always right? No. What it means is that if we both go into a process of discernment, that we have found that God will eventually guide us to a common decision, which is to say there isn't a voting system because there are two people that make the major decisions here in Energion Publications. And we do 2 yeses, 1 no, until it seems clear to us that the Lord is guiding to both of us. then we don't move. But I think we go back to the question. I want to get a little bit more specific. What is the bottom line? If I wanted to get rich, I would do my other job. I spend about 10% of my week doing work managing small networks. I also do custom software development. And in either case, I make substantially more money per hour than I do publishing. If the bottom line was money, I would do that. But at the same time, I think that the bottom line for the Christian, whatever it is that God is calling us to do, has to be the service, the ministry that we do. That means that when I fix a computer network, I fix it for the Lord. When I publish a book, I also publish the book for the Lord. And so, well, it is good stewardship for us to run the business wisely. I have people who are have better business understanding of business principles than I do. And I will go and present to them, here's the policies that I'm looking at, here's the process, and let them tell me where I'm off track. So yes, we want to run the business in such a way that we can keep on running the business. But in everything that we do there, the bottom line again has to be, how are we stewarding God's resources? And I will say right here and now, my view of stewardship as a Christian is that everything that I have, everything that I am, everything that I can do belongs to God. I don't give God 10%. God allows me to use some portion of the resources that He has given to me on living, and sometimes on doing what I want. But it all belongs to God. So to me, the bottom line for the Christian, whether you're running a quotes ministry, officially a ministry, or a business, has to be the mission that God has for us. Now, specifically for Energion, the mission that I believe God has led us to carry out is equipping the saints. That is, we're looking for materials that will help people to understand, help people to do better ministry in the church, help people to carry the gospel to all the world. Whether that is more directly or learning, your theological or your biblical learning, all of those are routes eventually to that mission. So we are serious here about the Great Commission, but when I feel almost like I've done one of those we're writing for everybody answers that I said the authors do when I say that, because that doesn't give the specificity, because as I said, I believe that is what every Christian is supposed to be about. In particular, though, we are trying to equip the saints, educate the saints to go out there and do the work of ministry, everybody, clergy, laity alike.
Well, I think sometimes I would say to that, that sometimes, and we've had a few authors that they are surprised that we see their book of poetry, or we see a fictional story that they wrote as something that builds the kingdom. And I think that sometimes people um, don't think that what they produce from that aspect is worthy enough. And and um, I challenge them to take another read through the Bible and see how the very common and everyday was was used to build the kingdom. And I think that when I join alongside Mary and Peter and the rest of them, um, I can I can use what it is that I've been gifted to do um, to build the kingdom, and that can include poetry.
Okay, well, since you put me in charge of the questions, I've got another audience question. It says, I'm selecting it. What marketing services do you provide your authors? What can authors do for themselves?
Mm.
Um, well, I'm going to jump the outline a little bit because I need to make the difference between uh, paid publishing and traditional publishing. Uh, because of this term services that we provide our authors. In paid publishing, which we do under our InterPower Press imprint, the author is responsible for deciding what to do in terms of marketing and, in fact, financing most of it because we pay most of the margin on the book to the author in royalties. Our main imprints, that is all imprints other than InterPower Press, we take a traditional approach, and in that, we are investing in your book. So I'm making that distinction because I think it's important that we don't see it as a marketing service that we provide, even though, yes, we do marketing because we are invested in your title. Now, how well that works is a whole other matter. And so I do understand what the question is. Our primary approach to marketing is through social media. That goes from blogging, but the blogging is largely then publicized through Twitter, Facebook, Google Plus. We have a little bit on Pinterest. We also have material on LinkedIn. So that's the primary way that we market. It is our primary method because it has proven to be the most effective over the past 10 years. Authors are often surprised that we do not do, or have not in the last several years, because we did for a period of time, do print advertising. We found that print advertising was never very productive. It was a very strongly losing proposition. So when we talk social media, you think everything there is free. No. Yes, the primary effort is free, putting it on Twitter or on Facebook, but then from there we can pay to boost that further or go through one of the various services to do online marketing. And we have found online marketing to be most effective. If you're an author who's considering publishing through Energion, I will let you know now that the odds of your book appearing on bookstore shelves are fairly low. We are very much an internet-oriented company. We have had a few cases where books are on local bookstore shelves. That does happen, but it is not something that you can count on or that happens regularly or frequently. Then we have the second half of the question. What can authors do for themselves? I tell authors one of the key things to realize is as an author, you are going to have to self-promote. That is, you're going to have to talk about your book and you're going to have to talk about yourself. I was looking at, we just got done sending out royalties. I'll give you a little bit of the inside scoop. The majority of our sales are done by somewhere around 10% of our authors. If you get to 10% of our authors, you're over 50% of our sales. And there's something in common about those authors that are on that list. They're bloggers, every one of them. Several of them do promote themselves as public speakers. They write frequently. Whether it's for other than for blogging, they also write frequently for magazines or other digital outlets, and they're perfectly willing to talk about their book. Now, they don't pester people about it, but they do let people know, look, I've written this and here's what it's good for. And so, those guys have that in common. And I will admit that most of them are guys. We are increasing the number of women on our list, and we are making every effort to to publicize, because we have some very good material by the other 90% of our authors. We have a lot of good material, but we have to get it out there. So, and I'm going to mention here that we have several things starting right now. Energion Discussion Network, which is energion.com/discuss. Steve Kindle is editing it. Authors are going to hear about it. It's going to be a way for you to build audience by doing a little bit of writing for and showcasing of your own books. These Tuesday night hangouts, well, we've had a number of cases where the sales are very small in number. Almost all of them have generated sales that we can trace back to the event. Now, I doubt this one will, because we're not advertising a lot of books. But
Oh, you're not putting my book out. Come on.
you can wave it in front of the screen.
Oh, I'm not sure if there's any left on the shelf, honey.
That could be a problem if we don't have it on the shelf. But in any case, these hangouts on Fridays now, there's going to be Global Christian Perspectives, which authors can get involved with. And I do a Bible study on Thursday night, on which I've interviewed selected authors. So all of those are ways to get yourself out and active. One of the things, and I know I've been talking for a while about this one, but one of the things that you have to realize when you start to publicize yourself is announcing, hi, I'm so-and-so, and here are my degrees, and here is a list of my books, does not cause very many people to invite you to speak. Especially, no church is going to invite you over the weekend off of your CV. It just doesn't work that way. What you have to do is have material that they can read. One of the great advantages today is, and with the electronic media, is that people can preview your book. But also, if you do writing on a blog, if you appear on interviews, and also, and I should have mentioned it, because it's actually where we put the largest portion of our budget, so I don't know why I didn't mention it, is sending out review copies. The largest portion of our publicity budget goes into copies that are sent out, and I will also say there's a good reason it's the majority, because it's a very productive way. If we find, and there again, I want to tell some authors, they think, if I'll send it to the following list of really large distribution magazines, they're ready to go. You have to get people's attention before you're going to get reviewed in these major publications. But you can get a lot of reviews from the next tier down just by being willing to take the time to talk to people, and has been one of our more successful methods. Blogger reviews have been very productive for us. So,
and you'll be surprised if you just take the time to talk to your friends and talk to your family and check on Facebook the friends that you follow with, or you're friends with, or whatever, and ask them, do you know anybody who is in whatever? I'm going to use one of my books as an example, because I wrote a book about grief. The best thing that I've done is to connect with people on Facebook who are nurses, or they're social workers, or whatever, in hospices and places like that. And so then once I get a name, or somebody, yes, I'll be glad to give your book to them, then that's a productive way to get your book to somebody. And you never know when they are going to get it, just the time that they're going to maybe a national or regional conference, and they're sitting there and they're rubbing through your book, and all of a sudden you've gotten the attention of somebody, like we said, in the next tier up. So it really is, it's a numbers game. And so to promote yourself is to try to connect with the people around you and their connections. And hence, I think that's why social media works so well.
Okay, well, for the moment, we don't have audience questions. So, what was next?
Well, I think that I'd like to do a little bit more onto the types of publishing, because again, I think that people are just not clear about what's the difference between paid and traditional and print on demand, which is also out there. So if you can, and I'm speaking strictly in dollars and cents here, really looking at the dollar and cents kind of thing. What is the difference here about what people, if they connect with a paid publisher, what's the dime?
Okay, well, there's really kind of a spectrum now, because both the internet and the technology that we have for printing and distribution has kind of changed the landscape. Probably 10 years ago, when we started, the idea of self-publishing was considered an activity for crackpots, and now it's a fairly common approach for many people, and a lot of self-published books have done quite well. Uh, at one extreme, you have self-publishing where you do everything, and that is something like Amazon's Create Space is a very good service for that. I've had any number of people who have talked to me about our Inner Power Press imprint that I have suggested use Amazon's Create Space. This is one of the things I'll tell you. I do not go all out for your book unless I think we're a perfect match uh, to accomplish your goals and our goals with the book. I'm perfectly willing to recommend other options. What CreateSpace does, though, essentially is you prepare everything, and you send them a file to print, and it goes out to print. And let's make another clarification. Printing and publishing are not the same thing. The publisher collects manuscripts, edits, proofreads, lays them out, does things like cover design, and after the book is printed, does marketing. Printer is just somebody who prints the book. Now, sometimes printers offer services for authors, and sometimes publishers own their own printing plant. We do not, but we have access to a pretty good network through our printer. You go from there to paid publishing, which is essentially, and there's variations. It's sometimes you pay the freight all the way. Sometimes you're going to commit to buying a certain number of books. Sometimes they'll ask for a certain payment that can go up into the thousands of dollars at the beginning. And it all depends on what they're offering to do and how much of it is left to you. So I'm not telling you to avoid paid publishing. What I do tell you is the same thing I'll tell you for any publisher is check out what they're going to do, what they've done for other people, and say, is this going to work for me? If you go all the way to the other extreme, though, we have the traditional model of publishing, which said you submit the manuscript, we decide if we can market it, and then we invest in your book. Now, that's the primary approach here at Energion. I believe I counted the total, but I don't remember Inner Power Press. I think we have something like 12 titles in Inner Power Press, maybe 10, I forget. And we just released our 139th book. So the remainder of those books are ones where we paid for the production and everything involved. That's our investment in your book. And the thing to remember is that we now have a stake in it. We're going to say some things about quality. In other words, you don't get to make all of the decisions. Our contract does specify that we don't force words on the author. But as far as things like layout and cover design, well, we work closely with authors. We don't, you don't control all of that. At the same time, you do not pay us anything except to buy books at your author price. And if you want them, and there isn't any requirement that you buy books, you don't have to. So there is no expense except for whatever it costs you to send stuff to us. That, you can charge some of the fee for your internet connection to the process, but we are not going to charge you anything except for when you order copies of your own book.
I think it's important to say right here, though, that there are a lot of things in between still, and it is so important that you as an author read that contract over. And I would suggest getting a good friend, and if you to read it over with you, because there are a lot of hidden things that can be put into a contract. Our contract in total is 6 pages, and I've seen some contracts that were 20. So you really need to be very careful and read your contract in toto.
I would add on that there are a lot of complexities in a book contract, and I am regularly asked about them by authors. What we do is contract for worldwide distribution of the English language rights, and then if it gets into translation, we talk specific rights for each language. You keep the rest. But a publisher may contract for all the subsidiary rights, and it's very possible as an author that you have no idea what those are. And so you want to check. I've had several authors ask me, do you mind if I have an attorney check the contract over? No, I do not mind if you have an attorney check your contract over. In fact, I think it shows really good sense if you have an attorney check the contract over and make sure that you know what it is that you're contracting to do. So, yes, do be careful with what you're doing, as far as contracting is concerned.
Now, Henry, again, I'm pushing to get down here to the dollars and cents. What is a royalty?
Okay, a royalty is an amount that is going to be paid per book to the book's author by the publisher as the book sells. Now, that's the one common thing that we can say about it. How royalties are figured differs. And so I have to explain this. We're not the only ones who do it, but we charge or we pay a percentage of the margin. That is, we take the cost of getting the book here to our office, we subtract that from the price, the amount we sell the book for, and you get a percentage of the difference. That percentage will be specified in your contract, and we provide a spreadsheet to show what that means, how much you're going to get per book. And that's based on how, of course, how many copies of your book have sold. And there may be other ways of calculating it. You simply have to look at how it's done to see what that's going to mean for you in terms of making money. For the most part, I will say at this point, in terms of making money, don't expect to get rich in this business. Let me tell you, as a publisher, I mentioned my other job, which is in the early stages was a major subsidy for the publishing. The publishing has gotten to the point where it's profitable, provided I don't count paying myself a salary. If I had to count that, we're still not there. And so with probably about 10% of my time, I make more than half of my income working on computers, and that's the guy who's publishing the books. As an author, if your book is a small pressed item, don't expect to be getting rich. We always hope We work for it, but we are absolutely not going to make promises or give you false expectations.
What happens if we have a contract with someone, and our usual contract is that we have the rights to that book for 5 years? Um, and what if 3 years later, gee, all of a sudden HarperCollins decides they want to produce the book? Then what happens?
Well, at that point, you have a basis for what we call a negotiation. Seriously, um, the contract at that point says we have 2 more years right to the English language version of your book, but it started to sell, and HarperCollins. We shouldn't probably take their trademark in vain, but there it is. Any big publisher wants it. You probably want to go to the big publisher, um, and I would just say we're probably not going to try to force you to stay with us and be unhappy customers for 2 years. On the other hand, we will probably want to get something in return for the 3 years effort that got the book to that point. And that's why it's a subject to negotiation. You say, you get the accountants to sit down and say, this is about how much that 2 years of your contract is worth. And you, the company that wishes to buy it, and us, we say, what numbers is everybody willing to offer, and you figure it out at that point. And that's when you hope that everybody is reasonable. I like to think that we would be completely reasonable, and like I said, I don't have any desire to have unhappy authors that I forced into a position. So,
Actually, we'd like to have authors that are successful, and that the words that they put out there would be recognized by other people. So we would like to see you successful.
Yeah. By the way, that would be a negotiation I would be happy to be in the position to be in, because it would recommend success. And for those who are considering Energion, I have to confess to you that we haven't had any books go that route. So, but it is, it is an option. It has happened to books. It's just in the 139 books we've released, we haven't gone there yet.
Let me ask you this. What is the difference between a scholarly book that Energion puts out versus a not scholarly book? I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, not scholarly book. Well, I would hope not to put out, books that are not scholarly in the sense that they are, shall we say, filled with inaccuracies or something of that nature. And the fact is that calling something scholarly or not is a fairly subjective business. But there's going to be a couple of concerns here. First is going to be the audience. An academic book, which is probably a little more descriptive, an academic book is designed for people who are scholars or have some expertise in the area to read. That's going to mean several things. The first is a higher standard of referencing. If you write a popular book of theology, a person who is highly qualified can write about widely accepted issues without providing footnotes for every last thing that they say. Whereas if you're doing a book that is written for scholars, really the first thing that the scholar is going to be asking is, where did you get that information? And so your referencing standards are going to be much higher. For us, if you look at the Areopagus series, you'll see where the referencing is very frequent. We use an in-text referencing to keep it from being obtrusive, but we have enough reference material in those books that a reader can go back and check their facts. So that is really the primary, that's probably the strongest and most important difference. The difference of audience will relate to how much you can use technical terms without having to define them. For example, if you're writing a Bible study guide that's intended for use in small groups in churches, and you want to talk about various kinds of biblical criticism, for example, you say, taking this from the viewpoint of redaction criticism, we see, and at that point, your church audience has just departed and they've decided never to buy one of your books again. So you have to define it, whereas your average biblical scholar knows about that, and he is probably going to say, that sounds like I'm about to get the wool pulled over my eyes based on the way I phrased that. But nonetheless, he being a scholar or she being a scholar knows what to do with that kind of thing. So those would be the major distinctions. I would make one point here that the person being an academic or having a PhD is not what determines whether a book is scholarly or not. It's the scholarship that determines. I have read materials by people with PhDs that were riddled with bad referencing and lousy logic. And some of them had been published already. I've also read material by people without doctoral degrees who, did very careful work. Now, that doesn't say that it doesn't matter what your education is. I think it's unfortunate that situation should be, but the scholar, for us, at least at Energion, calling something scholarly or academic is going to have to do with the content, the quality of the referencing, and the audience address, that is addressing an issue that would interest somebody who's already knowledgeable in the field.
Okay. Well, we're starting to get to the winding up point, and I guess that knowing you, Henry, I am going to give you a few extra minutes to do your wind up. And I guess I just want to briefly say that I know that there are some people out there who have written some good things. And I would encourage you to have somebody take a look at it. Because I think that that's part of what we're here to do, is to empower and encourage each other. And I think that um, don't think of yourself as not good enough. And part of what we do as an editor or as a proofreader, we're there to help you and make you look good. And we want to do that. And so give it a try. Give it a try. And I look forward to reading some things. What about you, dear?
Well, I think that the line that I want to put in authors' minds is that the perfect is the enemy of the good very often. And I've seen this played both directions. That is, where somebody says, I'm never going to be perfect, so why bother? And hands me a sheaf of handwritten note paper at a book conference to see if I want to publish it. To be honest with you, I don't even want to read it. It's in this day and age, reading handwritten documents is not likely. Yes, that did happen to me. Uh, Somebody starts writing 2 or 3 pages and says, "Here, do you think this would make a good book?" Well, I actually don't have any idea. It's quite possible that if you actually wrote something, it might make a good book. But on these 2 or 3 pages, I have no idea what's going on. So there's 2 dangers that you want to avoid. And the one is that you say, because the publisher has editors and proofreaders, I'll send just, I'm going to send my first draft. And that usually will result in a returned manuscript. I have quite simply, when I remember reading one manuscript where I believe I had identified 25 errors or so within the first page, at which point I said, I simply don't have the energy to read this, and I certainly don't have the energy to publish it. On the other hand, I've had people who don't submit because their manuscript is not yet the image of perfection. And I think both of these people probably know who they are. We have our perfectionists and we have our, shall we say, imperfectionists. And so you need to, take the effort to make it good, but also be able to say, this is done and ready for somebody else to read. And then when you submit to us or to anybody else, read our website. Find out what we already have to say about submissions, and the same thing goes for any other publisher. You should have already read the website to find out if they publish the sorts of things that you have written. And of course, that means you have to have thought about what you wrote. If you think this is a general book for everybody, you're going to have a very hard time targeting it by publisher and getting it published. What I say there, especially for Christian writing, is you're doing your work unto the Lord. And so you ask the question, is this something that is going to build the kingdom? Is this something that is going to be uplifting, whether it's fiction, poetry, study guide, devotional, or a revised version of your dissertation? Is this going to build the kingdom? And then put your best effort. And after you've done that, send it to publishers. If it's rejected, don't be discouraged. First, I always at least try to tell you why. It's been very interesting. Out of the people that I have told why, I've only had one person recontact and resubmit, and that person is now under contract for a book. Because he listened to what I said and followed up. And other editors are going to tell you things, and so go back and look based on that. Don't decide that you've produced the perfect manuscript, but be willing to go back and look at it and ask yourself some serious questions. So with that said, just go ahead and check it out and send us an email. By the way, we don't mind a query email that says, here's the subject. I'm wondering if you're interested in that subject, and before you even send a full proposal. But all of that sort of thing is what you'll find on a publishing company's website. So I'll pass it back to you with that, Jody. I'm looking at the clock. It says 7:59. It sounds like I'm off duty in about a minute.
And I think we are. And I really I really appreciate, especially things that you said tonight, the clarifying, and I hope it finds good roots someplace. And so we'll say good night and God bless you all. Bye.